It's a delight to be back. I'm so sorry, due to some technical issues, we were unable to go on air on time. But we're back, we're up and running because we have a fabulous team here that's on board. And it's great. It's great to be back on this show. It's great to be back to talk about the medical issues that matter to our city, to our community. And I'd like to welcome you all. I'm Dr. Shabina Asad-Kiyum. I run the Body Health and Mind Show here on Salam Radio 106.2 FM. And we are live on the Facebook stream, YouTube, X and Twitch. So please have a look at our shows. Engage. It's great to have you all on board. Call us on 01 733 602 133, or you can text us on the WhatsApp number, which is 074 11191062. Now, we have all been talking quite a bit about safeguarding issues that have taken place, not just globally, but more so emphasising on this country. And I talk about safeguarding from a very clinical perspective, but I still think that it's really important that we talk about what safeguarding is and from an adult perspective. And last week, you will have seen me speak a little bit about children safeguarding. What does it mean? What are the facets around children's safeguarding issues that you need to know? And also how to report it, and also where to get help from. And in the same way, there are adult safeguarding facets. Now, back in the day, a few years ago, I used to be a lead clinician for safeguarding for both adults and children. So I take my responsibilities very, very seriously indeed. But you may ask, what is the relevance of talking about adult safeguarding on Salam Radio, and more so with the context to health on this show? And that is because safeguarding, irrespective of your nationality, your ethnic origin, your heritage, is everybody's responsibility. So we all need to know about it. And the other reason why I think it's important to talk about it from a clinical perspective is because there's been a lot of objectifying around narratives that seem to pinpoint a certain demographic group, which is the British Pakistani group, the majority of which are Muslim. And it's important to talk about, it's important for us to educate our listeners about the common sense approach that we need to have and how we can all work together if we all take responsibility of making sure that we are well versed in spotting out the telltale signs of an adult safeguarding concern. That way, I'm sure that we're all offering our duty of care towards people that are vulnerable, could be at risk of abuse or a safeguarding concern, and any little action that you take to try and offset the risk of abuse or any safeguarding issue taking place with an adult means that your responsibility has been fulfilled. And I think that we've got a duty of care towards that. We dispel any narrative that seems to objectify anyone that is a victim or is seen to perpetrate abuse. I think that's really important here because in my opinion, if you've got somebody who is committing crimes that are as a result of abuse, especially whether it's to an adult or a child, actually in my eyes, they don't have any heritage, they don't have any faith, they are simply bad people. And that is how we need to label them, as bad people. But it is also important to recognise the association and the magnanimity or the volume of concerns that take place or have taken place, such as, for example, we have the Rotherham grooming gang scandal, in which perpetrators were identified as predominantly British Pakistani. But whilst that is important, it is also important that we also identify that such perpetrators did a huge disservice to the British Pakistani community in hiding behind cultural norms, societal norms, and faith-led norms to justify what they were doing, and that was wrong. So acknowledging that and verbalizing that shows that we are a community that utterly condemn any such type of abuse. So I thought that it would be a good idea this week, seeing that I've done shows on child abuse previously, to talk a little bit about domestic violence and abuse and what we can do to get help here within our city. I think that that's really important. So let's talk a little bit about it. Obviously, domestic abuse, when we talk about it, it can happen to anyone, and it's important to look out for the signs and where to get help. So let's try and talk a little bit around that, shall we? Now, if you are worried whilst you're looking online, because a lot of people do look online, you are worried that you have a partner that is subjecting you to abuse, that you are being found out as to what your online activity is. There is a website by Women's Aid that tells you how to cover your tracks online, especially because it's so easy for people to track you down. Now, the various facets of abuse in under the umbrella of adult safeguarding are having emotional abuse perpetrated towards an individual, having financial abuse being perpetrated towards an individual. Then we have the facet of sexual abuse, and then violence as well. So it's really important that we talk about a little bit about keeping safe. Now, what is domestic abuse? Now, domestic abuse is classified as when somebody, as a partner or someone else in the family, hurts a person or makes them scared. And that doesn't happen in a healthy relationship. Domestic abuse takes place in the home. It usually takes place in an area that a person would deem would be safety as well. So it's really important that we talk a little bit about what that is and how we can identify it as well. So it could range from anything, you know. You could have a partner who constantly puts you down. You could have someone who belittles you all the time and makes you feel as if you are unworthy. There are so many ways in which you have these institutionalized forms of abuse that might not be apparent but actually are, and they can constitute, and the impact that they have actually constitutes emotional abuse. So it's very important that we take that abuse very seriously. So I think that when we talk about it, and it can happen to anybody, by the way, and I will tell you, I was at a conference over the weekend in which violence against women and girls was being discussed. And one of the people on the panel, who was a professional, had said that she had been approached by a woman who was otherwise lived in a very, very comfortable financial situation, had a beautiful house, and she had 2 children, and was being subjected to emotional abuse. So the emotional abuse was belittling of her, talking down to her, saying horrible things about her. She had a job, she was earning, she was on her 2 feet, standing on her 2 feet, totally independent. And all she kept on saying to the person that she'd reported to the abuse to was, I can't believe that someone like me is being abused. I can't believe that this is happening to me. I can't believe it. Well, it does. Those people who perpetrate abuse may often choose their victims, but in very many cases, the abuse is very hidden. And it really does depend upon when somebody engages with you, if that is a partner or anybody else who lives with you, how they make you feel. And if they don't make you feel good about yourself in their manner of conduct or how they're speaking to you, and you don't feel happy in yourself and you suffer from low esteem by virtue of how you're being treated, that would constitute abuse. And I have Lee Taylor, who has joined us. Good evening, Lee. I hope that you're well. I really enjoy seeing you come to listen to the show, and it's great to have you on. I hope that you're doing well and you're keeping warm in this very, very horrible cold. It is. How many of you have you all been dealing with the cold? That was the other thing that I wanted to talk about, because it's so beautiful when you drive out early in the morning. And I was up with the larks, as they say, in the morning this morning, and I cannot tell you how beautiful it looked, all frosted over. It was almost as if nature had taken a paintbrush and painted everything white. It was beautiful, very, very beautiful indeed. So yes, thank you. Welcome on board. And Lee says, always love listening to your show. I had a bit of a nightmare with my MRI this evening. I'm really sorry to hear that, Lee. I'm really sorry to hear that your MRI didn't go as well. And perhaps we can bring that up outside the show. But thank you for sharing that with me. That's very important. I will register that. So, in the context of domestic abuse, like we said, it can include physical altercation, being subjected to physical violence, sexual abuse in couple relationships, or even between family members, parents against adult children. And often, and let's not dismiss it, when people talk about domestic violence and abuse, you automatically think of wives being abused by their husbands. Domestic violence actually may not constitute that. You might have an exceptionally strict father who is physically abusing and assaulting a grown son, for example. And I see that quite a lot within sectors of our community. And again, I have to stress on the fact that any information that is given by virtue of this show isn't because generalized. It's not opinion, it is fact-based, and it is also based upon data that has been given. Hidden forms of abuse aren't so apparent within the Asian community because it is a stigma and a taboo subject to talk about. So I think that it's really important that we highlight that not everybody is the same, but we have to be more slightly alert to and sensitive to the occurrences that take place within our own community, the Muslim community, that otherwise are more apparent in other communities, because if we don't recognize the problem, we won't be able to resolve it. So it's really important. But that's one example of domestic abuse. So if you are a woman and you have a grown-up son, but you see that your partner unnecessarily speaks in a tone or berates or belittles that son who's an adult and tells them that they're good for nothing, that also constitutes domestic abuse. And I think it's really important that we, down to a T, accept that it is, okay? So the more fruitful and the more welcoming you make your home atmosphere, you will lead to well-refined adults. Always be aware of your demeanour and your articulation with your own children. It's very important. Learn to speak to your children with respect. They will learn to speak to others with respect. Learn to ensure that when your children become adults, that they're not children anymore. Often what can happen, and I think that we're all guilty of this, that when your children grow up, they will always be your children. But I've seen in some setups within our communities especially that people lose sight of that and they'll still shout at them or tell them off. And indeed, I see videos where mothers are picking up their slippers, for example, and throw them at their son, because it's expected that they will put up with that, or that that's the normal thing to do within ethnic minority communities such as our Asian community. But it's not, actually, and it's not a good thing to do. And you are normalizing this behavior. So if you are a mother as well that thinks that you can take your slipper off and throw it at your son because he's grown and he's an adult, actually, that's something that I'm not in favor of. So I would, I would advise anybody against doing so. Now, when we talk about domestic violence in itself, you don't have to wait for an emergency situation to find help. If domestic abuse is happening to you, it's important to tell someone. And do remember that you are not alone. For anybody, whether you are male or female, that has abuse or is being subjected to abuse in this country, you're protected by the law. And it's so important that you understand that, because if you don't, then a lot of people find that, you know, they won't be able to live without this person. They won't be able to stand on their own 2 feet. The world out there is very cruel. They'll find that they'll probably find themselves on the streets. No, there are lots of provisions such as refuges, you have the police, you've got your local authorities, and even your GP who can help you. And there are many women that have fled domestic violence and abuse and have been given sanctuary and a safe haven within these refuges. So it's important that you understand what your rights are as well. And one way you can find out how to access help is to go on the domestic abuse on the gov.uk website. So you just go onto the gov.uk website and type in domestic abuse. The other ways in which you can get help from domestic abuse are the free phone National Domestic Abuse Helpline, and that's run by the charity Refuge, and you can ring them on 0808 2000 247, and that is a free number any time of the day or night. And the staff will offer confidential, non-judgmental information and support. If you don't know about any of that, do know that when you speak to your GP, all the information that you give to your GP is completely confidential. So they won't tell a family member, they won't say to anybody that you've even gone to see them, but your GP is a confidential place where you can report any domestic abuse, and you will be signposted to the appropriate help as well. But let's not forget about men as well. If you are a man who is suffering from domestic violence and abuse, you can call a number which is run by the charity Respect Men's Advice on 0808 8010 327, and that helpline runs from Monday to Friday from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Or you can visit the web chat and the Men's Advice line. You've just got to Google it and search it up. And that would be for non-judgmental information and support. Now, if you are an Asian woman or you've been subjected to forced marriage or honour crimes, you can call Karma Nirvana on 0800 599 247 Monday to Friday for forced marriage and honour crimes. And you can also speak to the gov.uk forced marriage unit. But obviously, in an emergency, if you think that your life is imminently at threat, call 999, ask to be put forward to the police, and if you can't speak, press 55. They will get to you. Come back to me after the break.
Stay tuned to Salam Radio after this short ad break. Satisfy your cravings at Ibrahimi Buffet Restaurant. Enjoy a tantalising variety of Chinese, Italian, Pakistani and comfort food favourites, from starters to desserts. Kids under 5 dine for free, so bring the whole family to our restaurant at 63 Sycamore Avenue. Open every day from 5pm to 10:30pm. Call us on 01733 313131 or book online to reserve your table. Ibrahimi-restaurant.co.uk. Every bite is a delight at Ibrahimi Buffet Restaurant.
Where can you get high quality and low prices? Amar Food Store and Halal Meat in Lincoln Road, Triangle is the place to go. Pay us a visit and take advantage of our special offers and great range of products on groceries, vegetables, fruits and halal meat. Also send money to Pakistan absolutely free. We have all top brands at special offers, offer free customer parking and provide a free local delivery service. Amar Food Store and Halal Meat, 613B Lincoln Road, Peterborough. Call us on 01733 687 374. High in quality, low in prices.
2020 World Buffet is inspired by the best foods from around the world. See our teppanyaki chefs grill your food to order, or choose delicious Indian, Italian, Chinese, Mexican dishes and British favourites, all halal. 2020 World Buffet offers you unlimited food at a set price. Open 7 days for lunch and dinner. Catering, wedding and party services available too. Call 01733 566 320 or visit 2020buffet.co.uk. 2020 World Buffet, 35 New Road, Peterborough, PE1 1FJ.
Attention foodies! Discover a world of flavours at Pack Foods, the largest ethnic supermarket in Peterborough. Shop our vast selection of authentic ingredients from around the globe, including spices, marinated fish and meats, and exotic fruits at incredibly low prices. And the best part? We offer free parking. No more hunting for a spot. Come visit us today and explore the incredible range of flavours at Pack Foods, 232 Lincoln Road.
Craving authentic Desi flavors? Look no further than Desi Restaurant. From midday until 1 in the morning, enjoy our homemade specialties that will transport your taste buds. Indulge in tantalizing papri chaat and savor the rich Chersi Kadahi. Treat your friends to our fresh 1 kilogram Chersi lamb handi. Plus, get 2 12-inch pizzas for $11.95. Located at 298 Lincoln Road, we deliver from lunchtime until 1 a.m. Call 01733 555 795 now to order and experience Desi Restaurant's flavors.
Whether you visit the Berry Furniture Showroom at 78B Fengate in Peterborough or view and buy online, you'll be amazed at the quality and style you could enjoy in your home. With beds from just £299 and complete 321 sofa sets from less than £1,000, you'll also be amazed at their wholesale prices too. Plus, there's a 1-year free warranty on sofas and beds, subject to conditions. Find out more, click on Berry, that's BERRE furniture.co.uk or call 01733 300 517.
You're listening to Peterborough's community radio, Salam Radio. Salam Radio. 106.2 FM.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. This is your very own Dr. Shabina Asad-Kiyum for Salam Radio 106.2 FM. And we were talking about adult safeguarding in the context of safeguarding and protecting one's well-being and welfare and making sure that people aren't taking advantage of you. And the fact that it is everybody's responsibility to take care of safeguarding. One of the things that I want to talk to you about is that there are fundamental differences between child safeguarding and adult safeguarding. And if you remember in the show last week, when I delivered the show on children's safeguarding, we spoke about emotional abuse, physical abuse, neglect. We've spoke about sexual abuse. We spoke about online abuse, which children will get, online exploitation, bullying. we spoke a lot about those facets, which also apply to adult safeguarding. So I don't want to talk about those facets today, but there are some unique elements of adult abuse or safeguarding that I really need to talk to you about today. Now, I know that, we have Brother Asim Mahmood. Great show, a pertinent issue. Thank you very much. It is really great that you are on board, Asim. Great to have you online. Thank you for watching the show. So, going back to the topic of abuse, you also have some facets that are very unique to adult safeguarding that you don't see in child safeguarding. I'm going to talk a little bit around those facets in the second half of the show. One of them you wouldn't think is a form of neglect or abuse, but actually it is. Self-neglect by adults. Self-neglect, how they take care of themselves. Hoarding. That's a form of neglect. That's an adult safeguarding concern. Stalking. Did you know that stalking also constitutes an adult safeguarding concern? So if obviously we have a lot of young people who are thought of as adults here within the context of the issue, but if you feel that following somebody because you take a liking to them is acceptable, well, actually it's not. It constitutes adult safeguarding concerns. So don't even think of it for the young ones that are listening. And I think that it's important that we talk a little bit about each aspect. So I'm going to talk first of all about self-neglect, which actually covers quite a wide range of behaviour, and it can happen because of underlying health issues too. And self-neglect generally means somebody who isn't caring for their own personal hygiene, for their health, for their safety, or even that of their surroundings. So it can include part of self-neglect. Also, under that umbrella of self-neglect, you can also have hoarding type of behaviours too. So if you've got an elderly relative who's hoarding, and trust me, as a GP, I have gone into properties where I've done a home visit and the issue has been hoarding, and I promise I have seen elderly residents who are sitting on a little chair in a room with boxes and boxes around them, and they literally have space just to get up and just to walk out of the room. Hoarding can be an absolute nightmare to deal with because it is a very addictive behaviour, and breaking the cycle in such people who suffer from hoarding is very difficult. But when we're talking about self-neglect, it's important to have a look at why it happens and what can be done about it. Now, self-neglect is a lack of self-care to an extent that actually it threatens your personal health and safety. So it's a real risk. And it's the inability to avoid harm as a result of self-neglect too. It's also a failure to seek help or access services to meet your health and social care needs. So that could mean, as an adult, if you've got decaying, rotting teeth which are causing multiple mouth infections, that could also mean that you have issues regarding self-neglect. Not eating enough, so you're losing weight, and starving yourself deliberately is also a form of neglect. And it's important to have a look. Keeping clothes dirty. Sometimes what can happen is if there is no underlying medical condition, but you are soiling your clothes repeatedly, not going to the toilet, not adopting proper health precautions, and that your clothes are saturated with human excrement or urine, that is also self-neglect. If these things are willfully, or even in some cases, unwillfully being done, that comprises self-neglect. And also the inability to manage your personal affairs, whether that be financial or health related or anything else, just buying yourself provisions that are necessities, milk, bread, things like that, to feed yourself. If you are not indulging in those behaviours, you could be self-neglecting your needs, which is really important. But the reasons around it can be very, very complicated, very complicated. And sometimes there are simple reasons for an individual's neglect towards themselves. For example, let's have the issue of dementia. There are some people that have dementia and forget how to do certain household tasks, such as cleaning up, for example, or maybe they're too frail to do so. Or somebody with a new disability who might not be able to maintain their personal hygiene in the same way that they'd done so before. So these are factors that can actually add up too. Now, when you have people who self-neglect and you report it to the safeguarding authorities, there is something known as a Section 42, which means that an inquiry needs to take place as to why this person is self-neglecting or as to why this safeguarding concern has been issued. And that doesn't necessarily trigger an inquiry, but what it would do is it would entail a means by which the safeguarding authorities or the local authority which is involved, including the clinics, including other multidisciplinary team members, would take a look at how that they can address the habits of this individual, and they would try and find a trigger factor to this type of behaviour. Now, support is paramount in anybody that self-neglects, and such people usually need a number of agencies to help them in line with the safeguarding adult processes. So professionals and meetings should be used to help that joint working, especially where a number of risks have been identified. So chronic self-neglect or hoarding is likely to have developed over very many years. It's not something that happens overnight. So it's considered a safeguarding concern at the point where the person with care and support needs can no longer control their own behaviour, so they can't protect themselves. That's when it becomes a safeguarding concern. Where there's a defined high risk of harm to the individual, so they could be getting recurrent infections. I'll give you an example. There was once a patient, a very, 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 very long time ago, who was hoarding, who wasn't feeding themselves properly, insisted on shaving every day, but would deliberately cut themselves while shaving. Wouldn't look or tend to the needs of that cut, and what would happen is they would then end up with infections. But when they were addressing it, or when the GP would go and address it with them, they would deny it, and they would say that they want to be left alone. But actually, they were causing a level of harm to their person, because these cuts, even though it was by virtue of shaving, and from their end they would have thought that they were looking after themselves, but they're actually cutting themselves and harming themselves, and then actually causing infection. Now, safeguarding duties apply where the adult has care and support needs. So, for example, another scenario is if the physical or environmental risk to other people is significant. So there is, for example, an element of risk whereby hoarding, which is a form of self-neglect, takes place, and it is so bad that health professionals can no longer go into the property, or care workers can no longer go into the property to meet the needs of this individual who is subjecting themselves to hoarding or self-neglect. When it impinges on the environment or the individual that are taking care of this vulnerable adult, then that also becomes a safeguarding concern. So the organisations to which these alerts are brought forward have to look at concerns raised to them under their own existing duties and responsibilities. So in short, if you see or are affected by a bad smell coming from the flat of a neighbour who may be hoarding or may be subjecting themselves to self-neglect, You have to demonstrate that harm to the local authority. You have to evidence it at the same time. Now, what I think we have to take from this is we've got to understand whether a person has significant difficulty or in discarding or parting with possessions, because it can sometimes be very difficult. So if a patient has an issue with discarding or parting with possessions, they may experience distress at the thought of getting rid of items, or simply be unable to either physically or health-related factors get rid of things, despite in many cases acknowledging that changes need to be had. Now, some of their items that they hoard might be of little financial value as well, so it's about really trying to educate them. Hoarding in itself, will you believe it or not, is also considered a standalone mental health disorder, but it can also be a symptom of other medical conditions as well. It's not a lifestyle choice, and hoarding should be treated as a sign of vulnerability. So if you know of anybody that hoards, always think, is this person suffering with their mental health, or do they have any other disability that prevents them from getting rid of things, or is there a psychological component to their hoarding? Do they have attachment issues with the items that they are hoarding? If so, then yes, specialist input is definitely needed as well. So, and in that, you've got 3 different types of hoarding too. You've got compulsive hoarding, and this is a mixture of objects such as old clothes, newspapers, food even if they're out of date, containers, even human waste or papers, can you believe? And this often comes from an emotional attachment to those items. Then you have something which is known as bibliomania. These words are so interesting, aren't they? Now, bibliomania is when a person starts to hoard books or other written information, like newspapers, magazines, articles, and that also includes videos, DVDs, CDs, and that's considered as data hoarding, believe it or not, where excessive storage and reluctance to delete electronic material which is no longer of use, such as computers, electronic storage devices, copies of emails and other information in electronic format. Now, it's very important that we look at that, because, I mean, there are some people that just, from an electronic hoarding point of view, I think that I suffer from electronic hoarding. I do get rid of my old electronic devices, but my emails I've got a real problem with deleting. But don't many of us? So I mean, what's a question not deleting emails as being a sign of data hoarding, which I had no idea about. I never even knew that existed when it came to emails. That is interesting. That's all I'm going to say. But it was something that I found out today when I was researching for this show, and I thought I would share it with you. So it's quite an insight, actually. Then you've got animal hoarding. Now, animal hoarding comes to when you are unable to provide minimum care to a pet that you may have in the home. And sometimes, because of their attachment to the pet, the adult won't always recognise that neglect is taking place of this animal. And the homes, if you go into the homes of animal hoarders, you will often see that in many cases they are rendered incapable of even living in, because they have been infested with animal feces and also pests such as maggots and fleas and things like that. So it's a really complex issue, is hoarding. Now, again, what would you do if you found somebody that was hoarding? You would speak to I would advise you, in the case of Peterborough, it's very important that you report an adult safeguarding concern, and you would put that in the search button. In many cases, you are asked to gain the consent of the adults that you are speaking to or reporting. If you are able to, it is in looking at your own safety first of all, it is very important that you take consent from this adult, or at least make them aware that you are going to make this referral because you are worried about their welfare. So do make that initial conversation if you can, provided your safety is not at risk. Now, when we talk about stalking, it's defined as persistent and unwanted attention that makes you feel harassed and pestered. You could be an adult of any age that is being subjected to stalking. It includes behaviour that happens twice or even more, and it's directed towards you by another person. And this type of behaviour then causes you to feel alarmed or distressed, or fear that violence might be used against you. And what makes the problem particularly hard to cope with is that it can go on for a very long period of time, making you feel constantly anxious and afraid. And when that impinges on your quality of life, then yes, it constitutes stalking, and it most certainly constitutes an adult safeguarding concern. So this can sometimes build up slowly, and it can take a while for you to realise that you're actually caught up in this ongoing abuse. And the problem you see with adult safeguarding concerns is that the problems aren't always physical. We always tend to think by default that the problems with adult safeguarding concerns are physical. Stalking can actually affect you psychologically as well. And it's not just about peering over your shoulder and seeing the same person lurking around the corner. That's a form of stalking, but actually online harassment and intimidation on the internet are very real as well. So cyber stalking, online threats can just be as intimidating. So if you think that you are experiencing stalking or harassment, what can you do about it? It's very important that you keep a diary of events. Write down the date and time, location and details of what's happened. And it's also good to include information about other witnesses who can confirm what has happened as well. Keep copies of any texts, letters, emails. Take screenshots of online messages, for example, on Facebook Messenger. Notify the police about what's happening. But do contact the non-emergency number for the police on 101. But if you're in immediate danger, do call 999. Now, there are differences between harassment and stalking. And stalking behaviour is characterised by somebody being absolutely just fixated or obsessed, which causes a victim alarm and distress or fear of violence, and can be demonstrated when it has a substantial adverse effect on the day-to-day activities of the victim. So when somebody feels threatened enough that it is affecting their quality of life, that, my dear listeners, is stalking, and it is not acceptable. It's an adult safeguarding concern, fair and square, and it's been identified as being an adult safeguarding concern. It is reportable potentially to the police. Now, what can happen is there are things that can be done to prevent stalking too. One way is changing routines, routes when you're going from work to home and vice versa. Those routes should be looked at as well. Changes to the times, if it's possible, if you can take a manager, whoever you're working with, into confidence about your issues. arranging for friends or family to pick you up or accompany you if you feel that you are being stalked or harassed, and for victims to put in additional security measures, for example, in their home, changing the locks, 24/7 security if you can afford it, fire service, video doorbell, and even CCTV in many cases. The impact it can have is this can also result in the deterioration of a victim's mental health, which can subsequently cause a lack of performance at work and a deterioration in their physical and mental health as well. It can also result in the way a victim changes or stops the way that they socialize. So it is really important that we talk about it. Now, what an individual needs to do is you speak to somebody about what's going on, okay? Be very wary that you don't have to put up with this. So I'm going to give you some resources that you can try and gain some information from. There is something known as the Susie Lamplugh Trust, which is a help website for further information that gives you personal safety tips and a template for recording incidents and collecting evidence. And the name of that website is www.susielamplugh.org. Lamplugh is spelled LAMPLUGH.org. And then you've got the cyber stalking, tech abuse, online abuse and safety tips at www.thecyberhelpline.com. You've also got the Alice Ruggles Trust, which is a website that puts an end to stalking, and actually the National Stalking Advocacy Service, which is Paladin, PALADIN service.co.uk. So we also here within Peterborough have something that is known as the Cambridgeshire Stalking Intervention Partnership Team. So do have a look at that too. Lots of different websites. So I think it's really important that we look at that. Now, in the last 2 minutes of the show, I'm going to speak a little bit about another form of abuse, and that's known as discriminatory abuse. That's something that I feel quite passionate about, being somebody who is from an ethnic minority heritage. And it's important that we speak about discriminatory abuse. In fact, I feel that I deal with far more cases of discriminatory abuse than what I should be as a clinician, but I certainly do. And it's actually the unequal treatment of somebody based on their age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy, maternity, their race, religion and belief, or their sexual orientation. Now, it can also include suffering insulting language, harassment, or ill treatment because of your personal characteristics. Now, part of that discriminatory abuse is actually hate crime. I've been a victim of hate crime. In fact, I would like to give a shout out to police who were wonderful in addressing this hate crime. And what I did was I reported it to the police. So if you feel that you are being discriminated in any way in the workplace, talk to a manager. If you cannot do that, then gain advice from the Safeguarding Cambridgeshire and Peterborough.org.uk website. And other than that, you can also have a look at other websites that can be used to help get in touch with the police and get some advice. They have a hate crime reporting cell over here. Use the online chat. But look, we've come to the end of the show. Once again, it was a wonderful opportunity to speak to all of you. I certainly hope to be back next week when I'll be talking to you about something pertinent. Drop your suggestions in the comments. It would be great to have some ideas about what matters to you. But in the meantime, keep warm, out of the cold, and hopefully see you soon.